In the riverside city of Port Rosalie, nestled on a quiet crescent known as Sycamore Close, twilight often settled like a soft, whispered secret. Here lived Ms. Elara Vance, a woman whose 70 years had etched kindness into the lines around her eyes, and whose small, time-worn cottage was an unassuming beacon. Her kitchen, perpetually fragrant with Elara's ever-ready stew, and the sweet comfort of buttermilk scones, was the unspoken heart of their small community. But one tumultuous evening, as rain hammered against the window panes with a ferocity that seemed to want to breach the world's defenses, a desperate, hesitant knock threatened to shatter her peaceful routine. When Elara opened her door, she found a young soul, barely visible through the storm, fleeing an unspeakable, invisible darkness. Before we delve into this profound story of sanctuary and lasting impact, if you believe in the power of kindness that can reshape a life, please subscribe and turn on notifications for more cinematic narratives that touch the soul. There, framed by the wild dance of the storm, stood a boy. He couldn't have been more than 10 summers old, soaked to the bone, his small frame trembling uncontrollably. The cruel map of fresh contusions on his exposed skin and the haunted, aged look in his young eyes told a story Elara's compassionate heart understood all too well. He clutched his thin arms around himself, less against the cold and more as if trying to hold his very fragments together. His voice, when it came, was a mere thread against the wind. "Please, don't make me go back there." And Elara Vance, without a moment's hesitation, without a single question probing his pain, extended a steady, warm hand. The heavy oak door of the cottage on Sycamore Close clicked shut, a soft but definitive sound that seemed to separate the raging storm outside from the sanctuary within. The boy, who later whispered his name was Leo, stood dripping onto the patterned linoleum of her entryway, a small, lost island in a sea of adult turmoil. The warm, amber light of Elara's kitchen, however, seemed to immediately recognize him, wrapping itself around his shivering form like a tender embrace. The air was thick with the comforting aroma of her slow-cooked stew and the nostalgic scent of scones just pulled from the oven, anchoring him to a sense of safety he'd clearly forgotten existed. He remained frozen for a long moment, his eyes, wide and dark, darting to every corner, every shadow, as if expecting a monster to leap out. Ms. Elara, at 70, understood the language of fear spoken in silence. She moved with the unhurried grace of time itself, taking a clean, thick towel from a drawer and placing it on her well-scrubbed kitchen table before ladling her rich, fragrant stew into a deep earthenware bowl. "This is my ever-ready stew, child," she said, her voice a low, soothing balm. "Carrots, barley, good beef. It warms you from the inside out." She set the bowl down, beside it a plate with 2 golden, fluffy scones, still radiating heat. Then she stepped back, giving him space, giving him permission. Cautiously, like a wild creature slowly coaxed from hiding, Leo approached. His fingers, chapped and raw, trembled as they reached for the spoon. The first mouthful was hesitant, laden with suspicion. The second followed quicker. He ate without speaking, but his small body told his story. The slow unnodding of his shoulders, the subtle deepening of his breath, the flicker of sheer disbelief in his eyes that someone had prepared this, just for him, with no strings attached. Elara watched from the old porcelain sink, pretending to polish a spoon that already gleamed, her gaze never leaving him. The angry bruises blooming beneath the torn sleeve of his sodden shirt screamed a narrative his young mouth was not yet ready to voice. She had seen such silent testimonies before. The things good people averted their eyes from, the pain children were forced to swallow. When the bowl was empty, scraped clean, Leo finally looked up. In his eyes, she saw the raw, unspoken question. "Am I safe here? Now?" She nodded, a solemn, heartfelt promise that needed no words. "And what might your name be, dear one?" Her voice was like velvet, strong but soft. He flinched, then whispered, "Leo." It was raspy, as if he'd forgotten the sound of it spoken without venom. Elara repeated it gently. "Leo? That's a fine name. A strong name, like a lion's heart." He managed a tiny nod, eyes downcast. Please, please don't call anyone. He'll find me. I can't go back." The plea was a raw wound. Elara moved to a nearby chest and retrieved a heavy, hand-stitched patchwork quilt, its colors muted by time, but vibrant with care. She draped it over his shoulders. He flinched again, not from pain, but from the shock of a touch so devoid of it. "Child," she said, her voice calm but unshakable, "you won't be going back to any harm. Not from this house, but there are good people whose job it is to help lights like yours shine again. I must call one of them. But until they come, and even after, you are under my roof, and under my protection. Do you understand me, Leo?" A single tear escaped his eye, tracing a silent path down his cheek. It seemed to have been waiting years for permission to fall. Elara gently cupped his small, tear-streaked face, her thumb brushing away the evidence of his sorrow with a reverence that spoke of a profound maternal instinct. Leaving him enveloped in the quilt by the fading warmth of the stove, she stepped into her small parlor and picked up the old telephone, its rotary dial clicking softly with each number chosen. Her voice, when she spoke to the Port Rosalie Child and Family Services dispatch, was steady, clear, and firm. She requested Ms. Anya Sharma, if available, a caseworker known for her quiet competence and compassionate approach, specifically asking for no blaring sirens or official intimidation that might further terrify a child who had only just started to breathe. When she returned, Leo had curled onto the small floral-patterned settee in the kitchen, the patchwork quilt pulled up to his chin, the empty stew bowl placed neatly on the low table beside him. He was already drifting into an exhausted sleep, the kind that only profound, protracted fear can induce. Elara sat in her wicker rocking chair nearby, a silent sentinel, her knitting forgotten in her lap. She knew the world's systems were imperfect, often slow, sometimes blind. But for this night, and for as many nights as she was given, she would be his shield. The night passed in hushed vigilance, punctuated only by the rhythmic tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall and the soft, even breaths of the sleeping boy. Just as the first pale fingers of dawn crept through the lace curtains, a gentle but firm knock sounded at the door. It was Ms. Anya Sharma, her demeanor calm, her eyes kind but assessing, a sturdy file folder in her hand. No uniform, no bluster. Elara felt a small measure of relief. They spoke in hushed tones in the parlor, while Leo still slept, Elara recounting the visible injuries, the boy's palpable terror, his desperate plea not to be returned to his unnamed guardian. Ms. Sharma listened intently, her pen scratching softly across her notes. "He's been reported missing before, from a custodial guardian after his mother's passing under strange circumstances," she murmured, her brow furrowed. "But he always disappeared again before we could properly intervene. This time someone was home." Elara simply nodded. "This time, my door was open." Waking Leo was a gentle affair. Elara sat by the settee, softly calling his name until his eyes fluttered open, wide with the initial, reflexive panic of the hunted. Seeing her, the fear in his gaze softened, though it did not entirely vanish. "Leo, my dear," she said, her voice a low hum, "this is Ms. Sharma. She's here to help us figure out the best way forward, a way for you to be safe and sound." Leo sat up, pulling the quilt tighter, his eyes fixed on Elara, not the stranger. Do I have to leave you?" The question was a fragile thing, imbued with a weariness far beyond his years. Elara took his small, cold hand. "Not back to where you were hurt, Leo. That door is closed to you forever, I promise. Ms. Sharma will find a safe place for you to be cherished. But for now, for a little while, if Ms. Sharma agrees, you're staying right here with me." Ms. Sharma, who had knelt to be on his level, offered a small, reassuring smile. "That sounds like a very good plan, Leo. Your room is ready, if you like, Miss Vance." Elara didn't miss a beat. "He certainly has a room. My grandson's old one. It has faded botanical prints on the walls and a view of the lilac bush. And there's plenty of stew and fresh scones for a growing boy." A flicker, just a tiny spark of something like hope, touched Leo's eyes. For a few precious days, Elara's cottage became Leo's entire world, a haven of warmth, predictable rhythms, and an unwavering tenderness he had never known. He woke to the smell of baking, helped Elara, knead scone dough, his small hands learning the feel of it under hers. She read to him from a worn volume of old poetry in the afternoons, her voice painting pictures with words that soothed his bruised spirit. He rarely spoke of the past, but slowly, tentatively, like a seedling pushing through hard earth, he began to unfurl. He'd fetch Elara's reading glasses without being asked, or silently neaten the stack of newspapers by her chair. Small acts of emerging trust. The day Ms. Sharma returned with news of a suitable foster family in a nearby county, a quiet sorrow settled over the little cottage on Sycamore Close. Leo didn't weep, but his shoulders slumped, and his hands trembled as he packed the few new items of clothing Elara had bought him at the local thrift store. As he stood by the door, a small, donated duffel bag at his feet, Elara pressed a smooth, cool river stone into his palm. "This stone," she said, her voice thick with an emotion she rarely showed, "has been tumbled and shaped by the water for a very long time. It's strong. You hold this, Leo, and you remember that your own strength is deeper than any river. And no matter where you go, you are never, ever truly alone. Remember, you have a place in this world. Leo, find it with courage." He clutched the stone, his knuckles white, then looked up at her, his eyes speaking volumes. Will I see you again, Ms. Elara?" She drew him into a fierce, brief hug. "As sure as the sun rises, child, this door remains open. Always." And with that, he turned and walked away with Ms. Sharma, not looking back, but Elara knew a part of him, the part she had so carefully mended, remained. The years that followed were a tapestry woven with struggle and fierce determination. Leo navigated the complexities of the foster care system, moving twice before finding a stable, if somewhat emotionally distant, long-term placement. The Riverstone Elara had given him became his talisman, a cool, solid weight in his pocket during lonely nights or challenging days. Her words, "You have a place in this world. Find it with courage," became his silent mantra. He poured every ounce of his being into his studies, finding in books and learning a different kind of sanctuary. He discovered he had a sharp mind, a gift for articulation, and a burgeoning passion for justice, for advocating for those who, like his younger self, had no voice. He excelled, devouring knowledge, his achievements stacking up like bricks in a fortress against the shadows of his past. Top marks, debate championships, scholarships that paved his way to university, and then to the prestigious Meridian School of Law. Through it all, the memory of Elara Vance and the scent of her kitchen remained vivid, a North Star guiding him through the darkest nights. Decades spun by. On Sycamore Close, Miss Elara Vance, now well into her late 80s, moved with the slow, deliberate rhythm of age. Her steps were shorter, her hands more gnarled, but the light in her eyes and the warmth in her smile remained undiminished. The world around her had transformed, but her little cottage and the spirit within it felt timeless. One crisp autumn morning, amidst a small pile of mail, lay an unusual envelope, thick, vellum, bearing an official-looking crest she didn't recognize from the Federal Justice Institute. Her name and address were typed with precision, but beneath it, a small, handwritten annotation simply read, "To Ms. Elara Vance, with enduring gratitude." Her fingers, now frail, trembled slightly as she carefully slid it open. Inside, a formally typed letter on imposing letterhead. It informed her that a Mr. Leo Vance Sterling, he had taken her surname in quiet tribute years ago, adding it to that of his beloved adoptive family, who had eventually provided him true stability, was to be inaugurated as a federal arbitrator. But tucked behind the formal notification was a handwritten note on simpler, softer paper, its script strong and familiar despite the years. "Dearest Ms. Elara," it began, "tomorrow I will stand before my peers and take an oath. There will be solemn words, dignified robes, and the weight of great responsibility. But I wanted you to know, before any public pronouncements, that every step of this journey, every small victory that led me here, began in the sanctuary of your kitchen on Sycamore Close all those years ago. You saw a future in me when I could only see shadows. You taught me not just that I could survive, but that I was worthy of thriving. You are the architect of the man I have become. With a heart full of love and immeasurable gratitude. Your Leo. Elara read the words again, and then a third time, the paper crinkling softly in her grasp as tears, warm and unbidden, welled in her ancient eyes. The next day, her young neighbor Kenji, a kind soul who often checked in on her, arrived with his laptop, a grin lighting up his face. Ms. Elara, you have to see this. It's all over the news feeds. He quickly set up the device, and soon the screen flickered to life with the polished proceedings of the inauguration, live streamed from a grand chamber at the Federal Justice Institute. There, at a distinguished podium, stood Leo Vance Sterling, taller, broader, a silvering at his temples, but his eyes, when the camera zoomed in, held the same intelligent intensity Elara remembered. He spoke with calm authority, thanking his mentors, his colleagues, his adoptive parents who sat beaming in the front row. Then, his voice took on a more personal, resonant tone. Many paths lead us to moments like these, Leo stated, his gaze sweeping the room. Mine began not in a hall of learning, nor in a privileged home, but on a stormy night, at the door of a modest cottage belonging to an extraordinary woman, an angel of Sycamore Close, Ms. Elara Vance. A respectful hush fell over the chamber. She opened her door to a lost, broken child, and with unwavering kindness she offered not just shelter, but sanctuary. She taught me the true meaning of justice through her actions, compassion, dignity, and unconditional love, long before I ever comprehended its legal frameworks. The foundation upon which my life is built, the very reason I stand here committed to fairness and advocacy, was laid by her hands, her heart. She saw me. She valued me. She saved me. Watching on the small laptop screen, Elara's hand flew to her chest, a sob, soft and profound, escaping her. Kenji gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "He's talking about you, Ms. Elara," he whispered, his own eyes shining. "The whole country knows your name now." She could only nod. The immensity of the moment, the culmination of a simple act of kindness decades ago, washing over her in a wave of overwhelming, quiet joy. The very next morning, while the dew still clung like diamonds to the blades of grass on Sycamore Close, a discreet, dark sedan, its engine a mere whisper, pulled up to Elara's familiar gate. The passenger door opened and Leo stepped out. He was no longer the haunted boy wrapped in her patchwork quilt, nor the esteemed figure on a distant screen, but simply Leo, home. Elara was already at her screen door, her heart knowing before her mind fully processed it. He ascended the porch steps, the years falling away with each one, and enveloped her in a gentle but strong embrace. "I'm home, Ms. Elara," he murmured into her silver hair, his voice thick with emotion. They sat for hours in her sun-dappled kitchen, the aroma of fresh scones once again filling the air, sharing stories, bridging the decades. Leo explained he had requested, and been granted, a judicial transfer to Port Rosalie. "My work is important," he said, his hand covering hers on the worn tablecloth. "But you are my anchor. It's my turn to care for you now, to ensure your days are filled with the same peace and comfort you gave me." Later, as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across her beloved garden, Leo spoke again, his voice earnest. "Ms. Elara," he began, his gaze direct and full of a profound respect. "I know this is unconventional, perhaps even presumptuous for a man my age, but I would be deeply, incredibly honored if you would allow me, legally and in my heart, to finally call you my mother." Tears streamed freely down Elara's wrinkled cheeks, but her smile was radiant. "Oh, Leo," she whispered, her voice trembling but clear. "My dear, dear boy, my son, you always have been." He then revealed he had already spoken with legal counsel. The process for adult adoption, while not common, was straightforward for their circumstances. He wanted to formalize the bond that had been forged in the crucible of a stormy night and nurtured by a lifetime of unwavering, unconditional love. That evening, under the quiet roof of the cottage on Sycamore Close, a new chapter began, not with a desperate knock, but with the joyful, official affirmation of a family created not by blood, but by a bond more powerful than any storm. Ms. Elara's profound act of love and Leo's incredible journey from a terrified child to a man of justice moved you, please like this video. Subscribe for more unforgettable stories that celebrate the human spirit, and share in the comments below how a moment of kindness has made a difference in your own life.